last few times we've been at a drift day and stuff, a few people have asked me what's the difference between the Accelera semi-slick tyres and say a set of budgets like these. Now I've literally just come back from BHP Fuel Fest a few weeks ago, and I did use exactly that, 2 different sets of tyres for the day, so I thought I'd quickly show you what the difference is. Right, yeah, so before we get going with too much else, let me just compare the specs of the tyres just so you know exactly what's what. So they are exactly the same tyre size, 225/45/17 on the Landsails, 225/45/17 on the 651 Sports. Now the Landsails are a 500 treadwear tyre, so if I just go over here, I don't know how well you can see that with the light because the sun's out, sorry about this, but just here you'll see it says treadwear 500, and if you look at the 651 Sports, you see it says treadwear 200. See if you can see that there. So that's how hard the tyre, how hard or long lasting the tyre is. So anything below a 300 is considered a semi-slick, so they're a semi-slick, whereas these are not. Obviously they're more of a road tyre. If you buy the Accelera Sport Extras, they're 100 treadwear, so they're even softer again. And generally the lower the rating, the grippier or softer the tyre is. So from the offset, I know that the Landsails are, you know, they're harder, they're a higher treadwear, obviously because they're made for road rather than track or drifting or whatever. So I was running them at about 40 psi, whereas I can run the Acceleras at 45/50 and still get as much grip. That's one of the things to start with, is that you have more to play with tyre pressure wise, because if you're trying to get grip, my car is quite grippy, it's quite a soft rear end with the suspension and stuff I'm running. The Acceleras, you know, I can run anywhere. I've never run them even on, like on a wet day. I think I ran them down sort of 20-25. I've never ran them any lower than that, whereas I've had it where I've been to days where it's wet and I set a budget tyres, I'm dropping them to sort of like 15-16. It's still, you know, there is a limit to how far you can go. So that's one of the things I like about the semi-slicks, is that you get more of a range of tyre pressure that you can use. These ones done slightly less laps than these here. So basically, so I had 2 sets of these. So I ran a session a bit on a pair, and then I ran another session and a bit on another pair, which I think are these ones here. I then swapped over to these Landsails here. Now, that is the main thing I'm going to talk about, is the treadwear difference. If you look, there's still a few mil left, so they've still got a few laps left for definite. But if you look at how they've started to delaminate, and this is one of the main things I noticed with road tyres. I say of all the budgets, Landsails are pretty good, but they do really start to, you know, bits start coming off and you can feel the grip starts to go. You know, they feel a little bit, the car starts revving easier. I'll put a clip in now of me going around in a lap with these. And then if we now compare now to these ones here, see, look how evenly the semi-slicks have worn. You know, they've still got a lap or 2 in them as well. I just swapped them out early because we were doing trains at BHP like as demos with quite a few cars, 4 or 5 cars at a time, so I didn't want to get down to the point where I had like no grip. But you know, these have worn, bearing in mind I'm running these at high tyre pressure as well, so you know the treadwear is still very even, bearing in mind obviously it's burnt out more of the middle because I had higher pressure. But if you were to run these at like 30-35 psi on a car that was maybe 400 brake or something, you'd wear these like lovely and flat, as long as your suspension is obviously set up correctly. But that is the main thing really. So if you look at these, you know, I'll roll the tyre along, you have a look, there's no delamination. The tyres have worn, and we were doing lap after lap after lap. Now the only thing I've noticed, which is probably just because of the age of the tyres, because they've been sat you know, they were part ones, is they've just started to crack near the edge, but that didn't affect the grip in any way. They were still very, very grippy. Now if I do the same, if I pull up one of these Landsails and you have a look at how many bits, so yeah, look, you know, you've got all these little chunks here, which doesn't mean you can't drift with them. Obviously you can still keep using them, but you haven't got the same drive. And what I find, you know, it starts revving easier, so you just don't get as much drive. You come around a corner and rather than be able to just, you know, say you stick your foot right down and then you start to catch up with someone, you just find you're like feathering the throttle trying to get grip. You know, look at this, is how much it's peeled away in the middle here. Obviously this is a cheaper tyre, so, and if you're not competing or anything like that, there's nothing wrong with using them. But I just thought I wanted to show people, because people have asked me, what do you think of the tyres compared to X tyre or whatever, which is very difficult to say because obviously I've not ran every tyre in the world. But so for me the biggest thing is consistency. You know, if you're doing any sort of competition, I wish I'd gone to a semi-slick before I tried doing any competitions. All the competitions I've done, I always use part ones or something like that, a road tyre like that. Looking back, if I had used a semi-slick the whole time, I could well have done a bit better. I definitely would have been more consistent, because the car feels pretty much exactly the same right the way down from 8mm down to, you know, 1 or 2mm, whereas that's where you lose it on the road tyres. You really get, you go from having, you know, a lot of grip and then you slowly lose it until the point where you're not sure entirely. Like those, obviously I would carry on using those Landsails, especially if I was just at a local practice day, but if you're competing, you wouldn't want to chuck them back on really, because, you know, 3/4 of the way through the run they might start to like disintegrate and then you lose all your grip. So that's the main difference really. That's not me trying to badmouth a budget tyre. Budget tyres are, you know, their budgets, they're cheap, they're a lot cheaper, and especially if you've got a lower horsepower car. So mine's only 300 horsepower. If you had, you know, if you're maybe driving a standard Beamer or IS200 or something like that, literally budget's absolutely fine. But once you get up to a bit more horsepower, maybe you are trying to find some grip or you're trying to, you know, chase people close, then the semi-slick is well worth it. So yeah, it's up to you really. I thought I was a pretty honest review, and yeah, thanks for watching.